Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Teena Love, and this is going to be a rare and exclusive episode of Getting to Know Your Host. That's right, yours truly, Teena Love. And I want to first say to you guys, please keep in mind that everything that I'm about to say and share are my thoughts. They are my opinions. You can either agree or you don't have to agree. That's fine. Listen, I'm not an expert. And I repeat, I'm not an expert, but these are my thoughts and my opinions. So don't take what I'm about to say in the wrong way. There's no judgment, no shame, no shade on anybody. But yeah, it's me. All right. So come on in, kick back, relax, take your shoes off, grab a glass of wine or whatever, pull up a chair, and let's chat a bit on the Lovers Lounge. So, oftentimes I am asked questions by my guests, when I'm getting ready to record them. They always want to know about me and they try to find out why. Why did you select the Lovers Lounge? So, what made you decide to do a show on love, relationships, and sex? And so I thought it would be nice to share my thoughts with you on the podcast and my intentions. So, those of you that, I don't know, you might be listening, you may know me, and then some of you may not, but I've always had an interest in love and relationships, right? So I grew up in a two-parent home, watching my parents be married for about 43 years before my father died. And it always made me interested in what the secret was to be able to remain married for so long. And so I've always been curious about people, their behaviors, what makes us all do what we do, especially when it comes to relating to one another. Say, for instance, as friends, as coworkers, love partners. So when I started to think about doing a podcast, it was clear to me that love, relationships, and sex were the topics that I was most interested in and wanted to cover. So that's why I thought it'd be good to interview experts on the topic because, listen, I said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not an expert. I certainly have my thoughts and my opinions on things, but I do not consider myself an expert on these topics. So I like the fact that I can invite authors and counselors and therapists and sexologists and even physicians and everybody to come on the show and to speak. If you haven't noticed already, I cover a variety of issues as long as they are related to love, relationships, and sex. And so you're welcome, if you're listening right now, to be a guest on the show on the Lovers Lounge podcast. As long as it fits the topic, well, you could be a guest. So we'll talk about that a little later on. But again, I have my views, but I'd much rather have you hear from my guests from week to week rather than hearing from me. So if you're listening to the show, you might notice that oftentimes I add a little humor here and there during my show, but for the most part, when I'm interviewing, I'm trying to ensure that I get as much information out of my guests for you as I can because I want you guys to be fully informed on the topic. So I've had about almost 40 episodes now, and I'm learning a lot. And if you've been able to listen to the episodes, I hope that you've been able to learn some things too. If not, perhaps this is your first time listening, or you've only maybe listened to a one or two shows. I'm urging you to, go back, go on Apple, go on Google, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and look at all the lists of the shows and look at the topics and look at the guests. And then, if there's something you want to listen to, take a listen. I promise it won't hurt you. If anything, it may teach you a little something. I don't know. But yeah, take a listen. Some shows are really content driven. They can be pretty serious topics, and I've had some rather out of the box sort of risque shows. So it's up to you as far as your interest. But one thing is for sure, when I'm interviewing, I'm, trying again to ensure anyway that um, you guys are getting the right information. So that's why I decided to interview experts, right? Um, I'm trying to figure out, how to lighten it up a bit and make it a little funny. But all in all, I am most interested in the content. I'm big on education. I'm interested in guests that are able to open your eyes up to new ideas, to new thoughts, to new perspectives about people and about things that'll brighten up and liven up your relationships and all of that. So, as I talk more, you're going to find out why. Um, One thing I'm finding is that many people don't want anyone to know that they listen to topics on sex or something about sex. Yeah, I think it may be rather embarrassing to some when it comes to sex and relationships as a topic. And this is just something that I'm noticing, that I'm seeing. I'm watching through comments and talking to experts and hearing comments from the listeners, just in conversation also with others, that I'm getting the idea that people are a bit shy or embarrassed for anyone to know, for instance, or to let people know that maybe they masturbate from time to time, or that there's big secrets between couples, that maybe one of them watches porn from time to time, or it's just amazing to me. But people really do. They have a hard time discussing sex, and it's almost to the point where they feel like they almost have to whisper it, sex, like it's this horrible word, but yeah, there's a lot of people who just are uncomfortable in regards to talking about love, sex, and relationships. I'll never forget when I was getting ready to do this show, telling people before I started the Lovers Lounge that I was going to be starting a podcast, and people would say, "Oh, so what are you going to talk about?" And I would tell them I'm going to talk about love, relationships, and sex, and it would be like they would just kind of almost lose their words, or you could just tell on their face they're like, "What?" But yeah, I mean, it really is interesting. It still blows my mind today, even when people talk to me today. Oh, you have a podcast? What do you talk about? And I say it, and they're like, you know, they lose it. So I don't know. I'm hoping that by doing this show, that it can kind of help people loosen up about the topic. There's tons of podcasters out there talking about love, relationships, and sex. So this shouldn't be like taboo. Um, so I'm hoping that all of us as podcasters can kind of help normalize this a little bit more and not make it be so like, doo 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 doo, crazy. Um, so yeah, but believe it or not, I've actually lost friends. I've lost friends over this, doing this show. I used to be maybe close with some spiritual leaders that no longer talk to me. Yeah, after they learned about my doing this show and some of the topics that I'd be discussing, it's like they thought, oh, she's gonna be talking about that. Oh, okay. And then ghost. I don't hear from them anymore. But that's fine. To each his own, and you know that's their choice. But one thing I do throughout my shows on the Lovers Lounge is that I always try to make sure that my interviews are done in good taste. Again, I'm having physicians, sexologists, counselors, therapists, people who are professional in their field, and I'm talking to them week to week, and so I'm just not throwing this stuff out there and just talking about anything. This is quality information that you're getting on the Lovers Lounge. Um, there are a variety of topics, but that's what they are. They're topics. They don't necessarily reflect my views and my opinions, but at the end of the day, I'm a journalist, I'm a media personality, I'm a producer, I'm a host, and I cover a variety of topics, whether they are topics that are of interest to me personally or not. It's educational, and I'm not going to apologize for that. After you're listening and listening to the shows, you can decide what you want as a listener. But for me, as a host of the Lovers Lounge, I'm going to continue to cover a variety of topics. Um, yeah, I've gotten side-eyed looks from uh, people who maybe go to church or different things like that, friends, and that don't really talk to me anymore. It's kind of like the elephant in the room, kind of awkward because of what I discuss. But I'm finding out though that it really has nothing to do with me. It's the level of discomfort that they may have within themselves about the topic, or for one reason or another. They have certain, sort of managed to, sort of project that towards me and their level of discomfort on the topics. Um, and unfortunately, it's just kind of caused a wedge, between me and those people. But I'm hoping that this show, kind of helps to alleviate some of that. Something else, this show has certainly shown me that many of us don't really communicate well. I can't tell you how many out of the almost 40 shows that I've done, um, that I don't talk to, experts that say something about, communication and how it applies. The fact that communication is just so very important, um, to any of the topics that I'm pretty much discussing. I'm noticing that, as full grown adults, people are having a hard time, you know, communicating about things that maybe they think is going to hurt somebody's feelings, or being honest about things, or their likes or dislikes, or, to their partners, or fear that, what their partners are going to think about them if they're honest about certain things. And so, yeah, communication is huge. Again, I can't tell you how many shows have come up that that's just something that really is important. And so we're going to continue to talk about that, I'm sure. Um, on another note, my interviews with many sex therapists and sexologists shows that we may not even know what we like or dislike when it comes to sex and our bodies. We've just been accustomed to sort of sailing along and, fitting into the status quo. And when I say that, I'm meaning like we don't want to rock the boat. We oftentimes, just kind of do whatever we need to, or say what we need to in order to keep the peace, and to make others feel comfortable. So that is something that I'm noticing through the experts and people that I'm talking to. And I'm sure we're going to discuss that more on the Lovers Lounge. I'm hoping that, the experts and the guests on my show can help us with the understanding of how important it is to communicate bravely, with sincere honesty towards one another, even if it's scary. So, for instance, instead of just ghosting somebody because you don't like them, or you're not feeling them, or, it's just not something about it, it's just not working for you, instead of just ghosting them, tell them, you know, yo, I don't know that we are a good fit, but hey, you're cool. Good luck, and just go on, instead of just ghosting the person and not showing up, or, letting somebody know that you'd like to try certain things, with your spouse or your partner, different things, and, mustering up the courage to be open and honest and to share that, with him or her. I'm hoping that, the show also helps people that are on the receiving end of communication that may or may not be what you want to hear, but that you create an environment with those people that you love that's safe, that's open, and that's affirming. That you set up an environment where the communication is non threatening, Um, that to me is very important. If I'm with someone, I want them to be able to share with me. That's a real huge pet peeve for me. I don't want to make my significant other, or my partner, committed partner, or if I am to get married someday, my spouse, to feel like they can't be honest with me about whatever. Even if it's something that I don't want to hear, I don't want to set up an environment where they feel like they can't talk to me. And so I'm really encouraging, and I'm hoping that people who are listening will think about that, because, you should be able to talk about that with them. So, yeah. Um, So, something else that my show is confirming for me is that, I don't know about you guys, but many of us probably don't want to admit this, but we generally do not know a lot about our bodies and sex. Now, I know that many women and men won't want to admit this, but we don't. I think that one of the most eye opening interviews that I've had was with Dr. Laurie Mintz. She's a professor out of the University of Florida. She'd written a book called Becoming Cliterate. And she discussed, how many women faked orgasms because they thought that that's what they needed to do. That many women thought that their vagina was actually broken. That they thought that, through countless sexual experiences, they would just lay there, not really feel the pleasure that they thought perhaps they should, but they didn't want to let on to their partners that they didn't. So they just sort of acted like they did. And then that was it. So yeah, I thought that was very, very interesting. I plan to have, more talks about that because I want women to understand and be more comfortable, with their bodies and to understand themselves more. And I want men to understand the woman's body better. So that's why I'd like to have um, more experts and guests on to talk about that. One thing also that's becoming apparent to me as a result of this show is that, you know, our parents, I am approaching 50. If your parents are probably in their 60s, 70s, 80s, then probably 9 times out of 10, your parents didn't really, really talk to you about sex. No, they probably didn't. Because many of them, their parents didn't talk to them about sex. So how could they share something with you that they didn't get? So that's something that I'm finding it's interesting. I think one of my guests even shared, this was a big eye opener, how in other countries, sex education, is really robust, right? That in other countries, they do teach sex education in schools. And so when you look at it here in the United States, we don't, right? And the thought is that, well, if we talk about it, then our youth are going to go out and do it. But interestingly enough, in those other countries, the numbers are quite the opposite. Their teenage pregnancy rate is very, very low because they're actually educating their youth about it. It's something about that thing that you don't talk about. How youth many times find out about sex because they maybe found one of their father's nasty magazines in the bathroom or something, or where those VCR tapes we used to have, you found those or whatever. That was how they may have found out about sex, but it wasn't like they really had a discussion from their parent, sit down to really discuss this, because the thought was, if I talk about it, then they're going to do it. And it could not be further from the truth. If you really look at the numbers and the statistics of our teenage pregnancy rate in comparison to other countries, it's totally, totally the opposite. So I'm a real spiritual person, right? And I often see comments from people that are like, "Oh, you know, if you're saved, you're in church. If you love God, close your ears, disregard, what you're gonna hear about sex." Like, it's almost like they're apologizing for talking about sex to or around someone that's a believer, and that actually just kills me. I'm like, what is it? People say things like, how can she talk about sex and talk about God too? Well, I'll tell you why. Because God made sex, and if he hadn't made sex, we wouldn't be here. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm saved. I love God, and he's my world. I mean, in him I live, I move, and I have my being. But I'm not afraid to talk about sex and relationships and love. He made us. He made our bodies. So yeah. And one thing that I'm learning also from this show, that many think that sex was only designed to procreate, but he made us so perfectly, and our body parts and the makeup of our bodies so very interesting. I cannot, me personally, again, this is my opinion. This show is about my thoughts and opinions today. Um, I don't believe that he intended for us to only use or feel or experience those things when we're trying to have kids. You know, again, that's my thoughts. So don't kill me. But yeah, I'm also learning that there's so much body shaming, so much angst around the topic of sex and spirituality. I had a guest, Dr. Spitz. I just did a show with him, and he talked about how some men can't even have an erection or fully ejaculate due to psychological reasons related to spirituality. So, like, a person may be feeling like they can't experience pleasure or ejaculation because God is watching. I had another guest that told me that she had a friend that, she was single, finally got married. When she was single, she was like dropping it like it's hot, doing all this, sexy, sassy stuff with her guy, and then got married. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, I can't be like that because God's watching. It's like, okay, yes, God is watching. He's watching you when you're late to work and you have somebody clock in for you. He's watching when you lied on your taxes. He's watching everything. Come on. Yeah, he doesn't miss anything. It's just not sex where he's watching. He's watching everything. So, I don't know. It just kind of bugs me. That's one of those bees in my bonnet, I guess. I really hope to dispel this thing that kind of lingers out there. And I want to tackle that more on the show. Again, I just want to get to the point where, you know, sex is not this taboo thing. You know, it's an act. It's an act that brings about something beautiful. It can bring about life. It's also a way that two people are joined together, to express themselves and connect as one, especially if they're joined, in holy matrimony. They're married. So, granted, if you're not married, I mean, everybody has their own cross to bear, right? And they have to deal with that. We shouldn't be afraid to discuss sex, though. And I think that we shouldn't be so judgmental towards people who are comfortable, with their sexuality. To me, God intended for us to love. He's the best example of love. He gave us a definition of love not only when he sent his son, to die on the cross for us, but there's an explanation of love in Corinthians. He describes love. He even says in one of his commandments that we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. He meant for us to relate with one another and to love one another. So there it is. Love, relationships, sex, it's not taboo. Um, if you're married and you're built and wired that way, you should be enjoying each other that way. That's my opinion. Now, I'm not encouraging people who are not married to have sex. That's an individual choice. That's up to each person. But my show is designed to educate, whether you are single, married, gay, straight, bisexual, monogamous, non monogamous, polyamorous. It's to educate and broaden your perspective on topics related to love, relationships, and sex, no matter what category you fall in or that you represent. Um, One thing I'll say that I am encouraging is that, if you are married, you ought to be enjoying intimacy and sex with your spouse. I mean, that's just my opinion. Okay. That's my thought. God made each of us and he made our bodies. And if you're married, it's my understanding that he intended for you to have sex with your spouse. One thing that just absolutely, now here's another bee in my bonnet. One thing that just absolutely disturbs me is to think that, a woman, for example, could be during her dating experience and her courtship, you know, she's having sex, she's being all sexy and sassy with her husband to be. And then you get married to him, and suddenly you turn into this like matronly Mary, prude Patty, or nerdy Norma. Now, come on. Now is when you should be. And what the kids say, turning it up. Now you should be turning it up, right? Um, there is just no reason why you get married and then you shut down, turn into a cold fish. No, that bothers me. Um, Another thing, relationships and marriage, they take work. I mean, you have to put the effort towards that thing. You can't just put all of the effort and just, enough to get married. And then once you get the man, then you throw your hands up and sit down and be like, oh, well. No, no, just like you did all of that to get him, you need to do all of that to keep him. Same thing for the men, okay? You're doing all that to get her. You need to do the same thing. Don't get it twisted to keep her. So, you might be listening and you might be saying, I wonder if she's ever been married. Yes, I have. And that's why I'm talking about this. That's another reason why I chose to do the Lover's Lounge and why I'm so passionate about these topics. I'm talking about these things from experience. And I'll let you in on something that I'm not afraid to share. So, when I got married, I'll be honest, I didn't approach it right. There are a lot of things that I didn't do right. So, this is why now I'm doing all that I can to educate, to share with singles, to help couples who listen to the show, because I don't want anybody to do or repeat the same mistakes that I made. So, let me tell you about one of the mistakes I made. Okay, so I had my son, okay? And I feel like when I had my son, I feel like I became more interested in being a good mother and I forgot about being a good wife. Um, I feel like I sank all of my attention into motherhood. And don't get me wrong, I should have been a good mother, and I'm proud of that fact. I mean, I feel like I'm still a good mother. I don't regret that. But what I regret is not being a good wife. I feel like that was wrong. Um, so the same level of intensity that I put towards being a good mom, I feel like I should have also put towards being a good wife. And that I think was a huge mistake for me. I remember, a pastor I had a long time ago, back when I was married, and he often talked about how, every child that a person has adds a new level of complexity to a marriage. That, things do get hectic. I mean, the more children you have, you're both working, you have the stress of life, everything, but the more difficult things become. And you have to intentionally work on marriage. That relationship is almost like a second or third job. Like when you get off work, you come home and you got another job. You got two jobs, right? You got a job of being a parent and a spouse. So, yeah, it takes intentionality and work. Now, a lot of women and men, maybe too, not going to like what I'm about to say. But again, what I say in the beginning of the show and throughout, this is my opinion, right? This is the exclusive episode of Teena Love sharing her, right? So something else that I did was I walked into my marriage still being too independent. Okay, so before you turn it off, before you like say, I'm done listening," and roll your eyes up into the top of your head inside, just hold on. Let me explain. So I was raised to be strong, right? To take care of myself, to be in control. I was raised to, pay my own bills. I remember my mother used to always be like, you better have some money for yourself, girl, because if something happened, you need to be able to get yourself home and pay your own way. So, and nothing was wrong with that. Okay, don't get me wrong. Nothing's wrong with that. But what I didn't know how to do is I didn't know how to transition. I didn't know how to transition into allowing me, once I was married, allowing someone to be my leader, you know, someone to be the head, right? And I know people have a problem with that too. Like, oh, that's old fashioned, blah, blah, blah. But again, these are my thoughts, right? I said this was a show for you all to hear Teena Love today and hear what a little bit about Teena Love. So I'm telling you, I did not know how to take a step back. I didn't know how to be submissive. I didn't know how to allow my husband to lead. And I know, again, there'll be women and men that'll disagree with me. Um, but it's important. Um, if you're ever on the show, you can talk about your experience. But I'm saying right now that I thought it was important, and I still do, that you respect the husband and that you let him lead. And not that he's running you or whatever, it's still a partnership, but that man ought to feel like, he is the head. He ought to feel like, he might be the decider. Not that he doesn't take your thoughts into consideration, but, God designed them to be the head. And he made us as females to be the helpmate, to work alongside of him. Okay, I'm going to stop. But that's some of my thoughts, okay? I just wish I knew how to submit. And I know that oftentimes people are like, oh, submit. Like that is like a dirty word. Sometimes when you say submission to some women, I mean, that's like you don't slap them in the face. They whole facial expression changes. Like it's a dirty word. But submission is actually, it's not weak. It's actually very, very strong. And I think that um, the word submission is often misconstrued. There is power in submission. And, again, I should have been more willing to let my husband lead. All right. So, something else that I feel strongly about and seems to be a recurring theme on the Lover's Lounge um, is boredom. That comes up when I talk to counselors and therapists about marriage and, people being married for like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years and so on. Um, I'm trying to encourage couples to, keep their fire and passion burning. Like, I know it can get redundant, right? But life should be constantly a learning process and that you're evolving and that you are growing and you're changing and evolving. And so I'm just hoping that the Lovers Lounge content can encourage you to step outside of your box, and inspires you to just turn up the heat, keep things going, right? Because many of you might be, some of you that are listening, you might be in an empty nest right now. All of a sudden there's no kids in the home and it's back to you and your husband. Y'all staring at each other. Y'all been so busy running kids to soccer games and hockey games and cheerleading and debate and all this stuff. All of a sudden they're going to college and you're looking at each other like, who are you? Wait a minute, who are you? You know, that's not going to work. And so I'm hoping that, some of the topics on the Lovers Lounge can inspire you to get out of that rut, to, uh, learn about each other more, encourage you to, push yourselves and to work and to do new things, do all that, right? Also, a special message that I have to the married ladies or ladies in a relationship, just in general, right? I'm going to say something. I hope y'all don't turn me off right about now, but I'm going to keep it real with you. All right, ladies? So I want you to know that there are women out there that simply do not, and I repeat, do not give a damn about your marriage or that you are in a committed relationship with your partner. Like they see you, they know y'all together. But do you know that those thoughts will send your husband pics of their breasts? They will send other nude parts of their body to your man, knowing that he is going home to you every night. Or better yet, let me tell you something. They'll be at work with him and they will flash a titty at that man. Sure will. I said titty. I did. They will wink at him. They will bend over in front of him. They will entice him. They will invite him over. They're like, oh, I need you to help me with something around my house. I need you to come and look at my computer. I need you to put some oil in my car. I'm not sure if it's running right. Look, these women don't give a shit about you. I'm sorry. I said the word. I did. I'm sorry. But I'm being honest. So I'm encouraging you women that you're listening to me. Keep that excitement going. Keep surprising your husband. Keep surprising your man. Send him some exciting photo of you. Pick, right? you know, keep him guessing about, what you're going to look like when you come home. He should not see you every day looking like Aunt Jemima, like for real. You need to get you some lingerie. You need to be spicy, sassy, and hot. Like that man should be anxious to see you when he gets home and wondering what you're going to look like when he sees you. Because, men are visual, they love to see. And you need to give him something to look at. Not that bonnet. Put the bonnet down. Put the bonnet down and look hot. Okay. Get you some intoxicating body sprays, some scents, put some candles on, light it up. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. And then now my message to the men. All right. So I just want to encourage you guys. Ask questions of your wife or your committed partner. Find out what they like. Be curious, you know? Be curious. And I know what you've been together for I don't know how many years, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But I'm just saying, act like it's your first introduction. Ask her where to touch and where not to touch. This was a guest that I just had on. We talked about this. Ask her how to touch you. I know it sounds crazy, and I know you're probably saying, look, I know everything about my woman. I know how to touch her. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. But no, seriously, you can never get too good or too old to learn something new. And it can be quite a turn on, as my latest guest discussed. It can be quite a turn on. So, men, do me that one favor. And then the other thing is, I'm urging you, this is on a medical note, to go to the doctor. Take care of yourself, guys. I know that you guys don't generally like to go to the doctor. Like, you probably will go if something's wrong, but you tend to wait until there's something wrong in order to go. But you need to stay ahead of the game. Your wives, your partners, they need you. And I'm not just talking about issues perhaps with your penis or whatever. I'm talking about just all in all, take care of yourselves. One thing we have noticed, I think, with this pandemic, you know, men, men have been attacked by this illness more than women, black, white, whatever. So take care of yourselves, men. Find out about your blood pressure. Make sure you don't have diabetes. And if you do, try to get your sugar levels down. Lose weight. Do what you need to do because your kids and your wives, they need you. Okay, so the Lovers Lounge. There's no judgment here, right? This is a judgment-free zone. And if you're interested in listening, you are welcome. I'm glad that you're listening right now. If there are topics that you'd like me to cover or discuss, surely reach out to me. My email is Teena, TEENAWEA at Comcast.net. I do have a Facebook page. That page is the Lovers Lounge Facebook page. On Instagram, it's under TL Lounge. Okay. And I gave my email. I'll give it again. It is Teena, TEENAWEA at Comcast.net. Again, if you know of a guest that might be good to have on the show, please let me know. I know that people have been listening. I've been getting emails from people to be on the show, which is absolutely fabulous because it takes the hunt out for me and I don't have to hunt people down. But yeah, so if you know somebody, please have them to reach out to me. And lastly, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, or comment on the shows. They can be heard on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. So you just go on there. If you're an Apple user, of course, you probably have the Apple. I think Spotify is on Apple. You can get that on there. Stitcher also in the Apple App Store. But then on Google, I'm not sure if you can get, if you have an Android phone, I'm not sure that you can get Spotify, but I don't know. You can look it up. And iHeartRadio and YouTube. Pretty easy. Okay. At the end of the day, remember the Lovers Lounge is meant to be a help. It's meant to be an inspiration. And education and enlightenment. And again, whether you are single, married, engaged, gay, straight, lesbian, whatever, this show is done with you in mind. Thank you for listening to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Teena Love, and until next time, peace. And of course, don't you forget, love.